And we're live. Happy Wednesday, everyone, and welcome to the Mojo Show, your real estate podcast where we talk about everything real estate. I'm your host, Joe Mortgage.
And I'm Cup of Joe Mortgage.
This week's episode is going to be interesting. We are continuing on in our 5-part series on Investment Properties 101. And today we have two special guests, at least I'm hoping that we do. A little delayed, my understanding is, whether technical difficulties or what have you, but we're going to power through this. But I'm super excited to have these two guests on. I've been wanting to have them on for a long time to give us their story and how they got started and built an impressive portfolio of investment properties. So today will be sort of a blueprint for beginners, if you will. But before we get to that, a little coffee talk this morning, Joe, but I forgot to refill my coffee. I'm like on my last sip. Do you mind if I go fill this up while we're waiting for this? Or
you're gonna leave me like that, huh? And I'm in a dark room today with the bright light shining. I feel like I'm getting interrogated. So if you need to go get coffee, Joe, go get coffee.
No. I should be okay with this. But
hey, it's just like anything. Things happen in life, and you got to just roll with them sometimes. And I know, technical difficulties, communication, all those things. That's the hardest thing in any industry. Is that part of it, and how do you overcome and move on?
True.
We can all sit here and be like, I can't believe this is happening, or freak out. And one thing that I've learned on our show is if it's going to happen, we're just going to roll with it. I'm going to do something stupid. I'm not going to be able to have the right things to click in, but the show's still going to happen.
Well, we're going to try to get our friends online. HTTP. I'm trying to, while we're live, right? Why not? Try to send him the via text the link. Yes. So we can try to, let's see. Of course, I can't see and text at the same time, right?
You're one of those keyboard watchers, aren't you?
Well, I have. Yes. Let's just say yes. I'll just make it simple and say yes. How's that? And well, especially on your cell phone when you're typing. I mean, you kind of have to, right? I mean, at least on the keyboard, you can feel the keys to know where you're at. But let's say HH.
That's funny.
C D U R, and let's see if that works. All right. Try that. Very good. All right. So hopefully we will have them on shortly here. And sending them did I send them the correct? Oh yeah. Okay. Got it. All right. So let's see. We may have guests and we may not have guests. We'll find out.
If not, we're going to talk about some things today anyway. So.
Well, yes, absolutely. But I do want to talk so today's Wednesday, right? So tomorrow is the kickoff of the NFL season, right?
Yes.
I don't know if I've asked you this before, but I mean, for football, when you're watching football, I don't care if it's Thursday night, Monday night, Sunday, whatever. Do you have a go-to of what, food you like to have, Joe, while watching the football game?
No, honestly, I would say Sundays is probably the only time we do have a go-to, and most of the time it's fajitas, just because I love making fajitas outside, and it's an easy, put it on the griddle and let it cook.
Yeah.
So that one's really nice. So that's what we do a lot of times, just fajita, and it's easy to munch on like chips and dip and stuff like that. So
yeah.
Having people over, it's a go-to.
There you go. Nice. I love the fajitas. Tacos I love, street tacos, right?
Yep.
But I love wings.
Yeah.
While I'm watching football. I love making the wings. I've got a few different sauces that I can do, and I love making wings. And then, of course, I got to have my guacamole I make. I don't know if you knew this, Joe, but I used to have 4 different brands of guacamole.
I did not.
Yep. So I love my guacamole and chips, while I'm watching the game. I'm not much of a beer person, but sometimes I'll Corona with a lime.
Yeah.
But yeah. So there you go. Some good wings.
There you go. Well, I'm going to try to change my lighting. I feel bad. I don't know if the dark room, I've got the blur on, so we'll see it when I turn the light on if it makes it any better. But I know, we're with the technical difficulties, guys. We're going to get this show started. I know we're excited to kind of keep taking this series of the investment purchases to everyone and try to help you guys understand and how to build a portfolio. So I'm going to let Joe go ahead and introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Joe. I am super excited to have our guest on. I know, I think we're just going to have one on today, and actually he's a returning guest. So definitely special in that sense. But him and his wife are owners of Everson Cooper Partners Real Estate Investment Company. So a husband and wife duo that have been investing in residential real estate since 2016 in the greater Houston area. Currently, they have a portfolio of 14 single-family rental properties, several dozen fix and flips that they've gone through and done, as well as renovation design business that they have. 2 of the rental properties in their portfolio are short-term rentals, so we'll definitely get to hear kind of their story of how they started, got into this, and have developed this. Please, everyone, welcome to the show, Andy Greever, everyone.
Hey, everybody. Hey, thanks for having me on. Yeah, technical difficulties is an understatement. So apologies for the delay for everyone. Hey, Joe's, thanks for having me on. Returning guest. Sad that my wife isn't able to join us, but I'll do my best Elizabeth Greever impression.
There you go. Well, before we get into it, Andy, tell us a little bit about you and your family, you and Elizabeth. So, our viewers know a little bit more about y'all.
Yeah, so real estate investors here, as y'all said, in the North Houston area. We've been here for about 16 years. We've been doing real estate investing since 2016. This is our second career, effectively. So, we weren't born into this. We had to, learn and grow into it. We're both former public school teachers. I left public school teaching in 2012. I got into oil and gas sales and continued to do that to this day. Elizabeth left her teaching job in 2016 and to open up Everson Cooper. And, we both run the company jointly. That's what she does all day, every day. Everson Cooper and our real estate investments that's her livelihood. That's what she does, all day, every day. And I was much more hands-on the first couple of years because we both wanted to make sure that we knew what we were doing, right? We co-own the company, and then ultimately, as she really started to become the expert on it and spread her wings, and I was kind of crawling into walking, and she just took off running. And so over the last several years, 4 or 5 years now, she really has become the expert in the space, and has done some things that we couldn't have imagined, didn't think of starting out early. So
Wow.
we've been really fortunate to be able to learn from a lot of people as well along the way. We're in year 8 in real estate investing, and we're happy with where we are, but excited for what's coming in the future.
No, that's awesome. And to hear that you guys just started in 2016 to take the jump and go into this, I'm gonna ask, right? How did you guys make that decision, and how did you get started?
So it all started with a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad, and in the real estate investing circles, it's a kind of cliche thing, but we read that book, and we were like, what is this? How in the world can we start doing this? And so we started with that book, and then it came to podcasts and more books, and then we started meeting people that were doing real estate investing, and we would take them out for a cup of coffee and say, what do you do? How did you do this? What did you learn along the way? And so it really was just we got a PhD in real estate investing by just talking with a bunch of different people, listening to a bunch of different podcasts like this, reading a bunch of different books. And that was really like the first year. We just dove deep into real estate investing. And, in 2015, we had no idea that we would open a real estate investment company. By mid 2016, we were going, full speed ahead. That's what we're going to do. Here we are 8 years later.
That's amazing. And to acquire 14 properties in 8 years. Now, are you guys, when you're dealing with that, what are you focusing on mainly, when you're getting started? What were you looking at from a savings perspective? Did you have to have a bunch of money saved up before you guys dove into this? Kind of, talk to our viewers, because I feel like some people are afraid to take that first step. They feel like they have to have too much money saved up, or they don't have enough money saved up. So kind of, speak on that if you can for just a brief second.
Yeah. So, with us both being, public school teachers, that was our first career. We did not have
money just flowing in, right?
Yeah. We cashed out our, $1 million retirements after. Yeah. No, not at all. Reading the books and reading, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, we understood what the power of leverage could do. And so while we did, spend some of our own money, it was like $20,000 at the time, which is nothing in real estate. We used that to be able to leverage into what's called hard money. And that's basically a no strings attached, high interest loan that once you identify a property, we identify distressed properties, single family distressed properties. And so we would find a property, say to use round numbers, $100,000. The what's called after repair value, or ARV, might be $180,000, right? We would need to spend, we'll just say $20,000 to $25,000 to fix it up. So that hard money loan, we would use $100,000 plus the 25, get a loan for $125,000 to buy the house and do the renovation, and then we would refinance out of that at a lower long-term interest, or long-term loan. And once we understood how that process went, where the risk came from, and how you mitigate that risk, and using the power of leverage, we did one, and then we did our first rental property in early 2018. And then we got a second one about 6 months later. Like, I think we've really got this figured out. We understood the power of using that leverage.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. I think, we've talked the past 2 episodes, we've talked, right, about hard money loans and how people are getting them, not knowing how much they have to have saved up to know that, if you have $20,000 and stuff like that, it's possible, depending on the house probably and the size of the loan you're asking for. I don't think your first house you guys went after was a $500,000 property trying to turn it around and make $200,000 off of it. I think everybody's got these big, plans in their heads when it comes to this, so that's one thing when you're getting started. What kind of was that? I don't know, that price range. I don't know if that's the right question that I'm trying to find, or what was it that just tied you to, okay, we need to stay in this area. We need to stay in this price range. These are the homes we're seeing that will bring us back some of a profit, but maybe not the $100,000 everybody wants to make on their first deal. You kind of summed it up there. You're buying it for 125, need to sell it for 180. Kind of, with somebody starting out, kind of tell us the pros and cons between the size and the value of a house when they're going into this.
Yeah, I'll put this in baseball terms. When you're really starting out, you want to swing for singles, and maybe you get a double, right?
I like it.
Where people can really get themselves in trouble is they go up to the plate the very first time they've never swung the bat and they try to hit a home run.
Oh yeah,
and a home run means you got a lot more zeros behind it. Our first couple, we're singles. We were like kind of dipping our toes in the water, understanding the process. If it wasn't successful, we weren't gonna just lose our entire, livelihood and life savings and things like that. After we did the first couple, we were like, okay, now we can take on a little bit bigger. And it's because we understood where the risk factors came from and how to mitigate those. But when you're doing something for the very first time, you don't know, right? You don't understand where the potholes are. And, if something happens, is this a serious problem or is this something that's not a big problem at all? Start slow. And I think that's just a business, just a general business principle to have as well. If you're starting a new business, if you're trying to go and swing for the fences at the first time, you might hit it big, but at the same time, the risk exposure that you open yourself up to could be catastrophic and set you back for, years, if not, more than a decade. And we weren't willing to do that. We wanted to make sure that we were methodical about what we were doing. And so the first couple of houses that we looked at, exactly, I mean, really, I think to talk specific numbers, I think we bought the house for like $95,000 and put like $2,000 into the renovation.
Wow.
Now we kept it as a rental property, and we still have it, to this day. And fortunately, it's appreciated, right, over time. But we made sure that where we bought it and the amount that we renovated it for made sense for what we could rent it for. And we kind of talk about like sticking to the numbers to make sure that we're responsible. And so we kind of have a process of a framework for how we run our numbers to make sure that we're being responsible for our business model. So yeah, starting out, I think my thing would be understand your risk tolerance. If you're coming from, a tech job or an oil and gas job or whatever, you got, high 6 figures, 7 figures in your bank account, your risk factor might be a little bit bigger than us when we had, like 20 grand.
Right.
So
I would love to have our viewers be those 7 figures in their savings account. I don't think they are.
Yeah.
So I think they're like us.
Not yet.
I love the analogy that you gave, though, as far as baseball and just hitting singles. I think that's a great analogy. Before we go further, though, I do want to mention if anyone has comments, questions, I mean, while we have Andy on, please post those questions because Andy's been through it. Him and Elizabeth have been through it. They've been doing this for 8 years. They know the potholes. They know what to watch out for. So if you have questions, please post them. I was going to ask the question, Andy, but you already answered it as far as do you still have that first home? And it sounds like you guys do still have that first investment property. I take it it's a long-term investment property then, not a short-term?
It is. Yeah. Our first, our first 12 rental properties were all long-term rental properties. And so every rental property that we have purchased that we turn into a rental property, we have kept so far. We have not sold anything out of our portfolio. We've been really fortunate because we have stuck to the framework of numbers that we use. So we bought that in March of 2018 and we still have it today. And it's been great.
Wow.
It's been great for us. Number one, it cash flows. Number two, we captured equity on the buy. And, we're fortunate to be in an area here in North Houston where we focus. It's an appreciating area. And that's just, appreciation is something that is great to have. And it's certainly an area that you want to focus on. But for us, our business model is number one, we want to make sure that we cash flow on our rental properties. We're just not willing to, take money out of our business, take money out of our own pockets to fund a rental property. That's our business model. Number two, we focus on properties that we can buy under market. And so I couldn't, said that property that we bought for like $95,000, if we wanted to turn around and flip it, we could have sold it for about $155, $160. So we could have made a profit. So we know that holding it, if we really have to, if we're getting in a troubled spot where we're not cash flowing or we have some renters that just aren't good, we can actually sell it and we'll still be made whole. So we always do cash flow first, equity capture second, and then appreciation third. Because appreciation, we have very little control over appreciation.
Yeah, that all depends on the market. But I love how your new phone, you must have the newer iPhone, just did balloons whenever it said something. So, viewers got to see the balloons too. That was not our special effects. That's his phone doing it himself.
I don't even know.
We're celebrating something.
I'm not even a tech guy. I have no idea.
That was awesome. Well, you talk about appreciation, and we all want appreciation, right? But again, at the end of the day, we're not in control of appreciation. It's more based on economy, political views, and things that are going on out there that affect our appreciation. But over long term, there's not been a house that's ever not appreciated, from when you bought it, depending on how long you're holding on to it too. I went through the crash in 2007, 8, 9. out in Arizona, and the homes that were foreclosing on back then at 195,000 when you bought it for 400, they're back up to 500,000 plus values. So this market turns sometimes, but it does come back around. It just depends on how long you're holding on to them, and your business model, making sure you're cash flowing on the rent. Now let's speak about that real quick, because I know I want to get into the long-term, short-term rentals. But when you're talking about cash flowing, for people that are getting into this, you're not putting a ton of your money into it to have a lower loan, right? You're refinancing to drop down. When you say cash flow, what is the lowest amount that you guys allow from a cash flow perspective? Is it just break even? And, what is that sweet spot that you're seeing on a cash flow when you're starting out on a new property?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's changed over time, because we have a portfolio now that's, if we're very low to zero cash flow, our portfolio can handle it. We have 14 properties that can handle it. When we first started out, we had to make sure that it was at least a couple $100. If after the first month's rent, if the water heater goes out, we've got $400 in reserves, right, to be able to pay for that. Just small incidental things like that. And so to talk specifically, our first rental of the property that we picked up in 2018, I think we cash flowed like $400 the first time, and we were very fortunate. That's not always a thing that's going to happen. We have a couple others that maybe are a couple $100, and now over time, as rents have gone up, as the market has appreciated for the value of homes as well, we have some rental properties that do really well, high hundreds, each month. At the same time, for our business model, we also try to push on the higher end of rent. Well, I have some friends that joke that we're slumlords, and I'm like, I let them joke. I'm like, hey, but we really take care of our properties. We want our property to have one of the best yards in the neighborhood. It looks the best in the neighborhood. When our tenants or guests in our short-term rentals come in, they're like, whoa, this place looks really great, because we want to try and make rental properties and short-term rentals something that we would actually stay in and we would live in as well. If I wouldn't be comfortable with my mom staying there, it's probably, I probably not, we're not doing the right thing. I think,
right.
Well, if I can interrupt here for a second, I do want to introduce someone, a special guest, the other half, if you will, of the Everson Cooper company, if you will. I do want to bring on stage Elizabeth. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here today with y'all.
Now it's if we can figure out how to have both of you over on one side. I don't think we're going to be able to figure that out.
I'm trying to figure that one out. We've never had two guests on before, Joe. Right?
Well, not on two different cameras. You are correct.
You are correct. Keep going. I'll figure this out.
Elizabeth, it's very nice to meet you. I know last time I didn't get to meet you. So, Andy already told us a little bit about y'all and how you started up the business in 2016. And we just got done kind of talking about how y'all got started, just to bring you up to speed. So we're about to dive into the next topic, and I'm going to take that from Joe since he's trying to figure out the technology still. Can you guys explain the difference between when you're looking at a long-term type rental versus a short-term rental, and what the differences are between the two when you're looking at them?
Sure. Anytime we look at a property, it's the same type of property that we want to buy, no matter we're going to rent it long-term, short-term, flip it, whatever. We're looking for those properties where we can add value. And so that comes in, renovations, upgrades, repairs, things like that. And so that's always the first step is just evaluating, what needs to be done to the house to make it this amazing, safe, beautiful place for people to be. But then it's looking at the market and what's happening in the market. So, are there a lot of long-term rentals in the area? And if so, are they moving? How long are they sitting on the market before they're rented? What are they renting for? Does that rent make sense? And then comparing that rent, of course, to our mortgage, taxes, insurance, things like that. And so really making sure that long-term rental can provide us some stability in holding it that way, right? Because sometimes the rent isn't matching what the mortgage is, especially these last few years with the mortgage rates being higher. It's a little bit harder to cash flow on a long-term rental. And so then you look at short-term rental, but it's the same type of thing. And instead of getting on HAR to look at what's going on, you're going to get on Airbnb and Vrbo and some of these other short-term rental sites that kind of bring owners and guests together. And again, see what's going on. See how many houses are in the area that are for rent short-term. Look at their calendars. There's also a number of softwares, including one called AirDNA, where you can see more of the statistics behind different short-term rentals to see like what is their occupancy. And so when we look at a property for a short-term rental, we're going to say, okay, what is like our worst case scenario, right? What if we're only booked 10, 15% of the month? Is that going to be enough to help us feel comfortable with, again, our mortgage, taxes, insurance, things like that? And then beyond that, you know, what's the high end of that? What if we're booked 60, 70, 80% of the time? You know, what does that look like? And just kind of making sure that we're comfortable in that zone of what's the worst case, what's the best case. And then we do the same with the long term. You know, what's the lowest rent, what's the highest rent? And like Andy said, you know, we try and make our rentals as nice as we can so that we can drive that rental price. You know, so we're doing nicer counters, nicer finishes throughout the house, really taking care of the house, taking care of all the safety issues that are needed so that we can drive that rent and people can feel really comfortable and taken care of in our homes. So at the end of the day, it's really a decision that you have to make for yourself as the investor of what you are comfortable with based on what your expenses are and what's coming in. But you know, we just kind of look at, see what's best and worst case scenario. Are we comfortable with that? Okay, cool. You know, the short-term rental aspect of it is a lot more work. So usually with a short-term rental, you are going to make more money than a long-term, but it is constant. And if you don't have people helping you, even just responding to guests, you are attached to your phone, which I know in real estate we already are very often. However, it's really constantly being ready for people and making sure those houses are ready and that they feel like they're the first person to ever come into that house and stay in that house. So you want to make sure your turnovers are perfect. Your team is showing up. You know, there's so many different elements that come with maintaining and managing a short-term rental. And so you have to decide if that money that you're going to make that's, you know, more than the long-term rental is worth it. Because it's going to be a lot of work. So there's a lot that goes into it. At the end of the day, you just have to kind of decide on what your tolerance is for all of the elements that come with either a short or long-term rental.
Yeah. The added expense of the cleaning services and things like that is one thing that you don't think about on a short-term rental. Mm-hmm. But like you said, if you have a team, it seems like it's going to be easier to manage that. But starting out, you're not always going to have that team. So knowing people or having, you know, different resources. I know, Andy, you said you listened to podcasts and read books to kind of come up with it. Elizabeth, is that what you did too, to kind of, figure out what's best and stuff like that? So on the short-term rental, you know, is it better to have it in more of a touristy area? Because right now we hear a lot on the news in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you know, Dallas City is about to put a ban in certain areas on short-term rentals because there's been a lot more crime. And I'm like, okay, well, why would there be short-term rentals just in a neighborhood, but it's not around like a lake or it's not around the ski area and things like that, you know? But I think people don't understand the concept of short-term rentals aren't always just the touristy plots. But how do you guys judge that when it comes to the short-term rental piece too?
Yeah, so that's actually, it's a really good point, and it was very surprising to me. So we've got a property on the lake and a property here in the Woodlands that are both short-term rentals. And the one in the Woodlands is more consistently booked. Now the lake one's more expensive. The lake one, you know, the summer season is wild up there. But overall, throughout the whole year, the one here in the Woodlands is more consistently booked. And people are coming into town to see family. They're coming into town for work. They're coming to town for concerts. They're coming to town for weddings, to go to the hospitals around here. So when your kind of community has a lot of things going on that people are coming here for, a lot of times staying in a short-term rental is a lot more economical than a hotel. And if you're coming with friends and family, then you're all in the one place instead of being in separate hotel rooms and things like that. You've got the kitchen, like you've got a yard if you're bringing an animal or kids. Like you just have so much more flexibility with a short-term rental. And a lot of times the price per night is comparable to one hotel room.
Right.
So, it makes a lot of sense for people to stay in a short-term rental and just enjoy kind of the luxuries that come with that. So if you're looking at a short-term rental kind of more in like a suburban neighborhood type of area, then, think about what brings people there. And if there's enough of that, then you're absolutely going to get people renting there, and it's not just a vacation thing. And it's really too bad that all these cities are starting to shut short-term rentals down, because in a lot of ways, I find them to be a lot better than long-term rentals. But I think also as a host, you have to have strict rules, and you have to hold people to those rules, and you have to make sure that they, approve those rules before they come, and have certain things in place. And I think when you do some of those extra steps and don't just accept any guests, then you're not going to have all of these problems with crime and parties and damage, all this stuff, because you're setting a standard for your guests on the front end. And I think that makes a really big difference. But not everybody's going to do that. And it's hard to turn away, when people are requesting to have some sort of party at your house or whatever. It's hard to turn that money down. But at the end of the day, like, we've got to keep our investment safe, and we want to keep our neighborhood safe too. So we're not just going to let people come and bring 20 or 30 people to our house and have a party. So, there's a balance there that you really have to figure out too as a host, to be able to keep your property and your neighborhood safe too.
Is there kind of an average of night stay that people usually end up? I mean, I don't know, a weekend or a week? I mean, is there an average typically that you see?
So in the suburban house that we have here in the Woodlands, it seems like it's either one night stays or 3+ night stays. Okay. People are either in and out to go to the pavilion for a concert, or they're here for a week for work. There's not a ton of in between. It's kind of interesting, but then also there's a lot more last minute bookings. Like, I get a lot of like same day requests, wow, which really surprises me. I don't get that as much at the lake. The lake is a lot more often a weekend booking. So 2 nights, sometimes 3 nights. But then we also do get a lot of one-nighters up there because of weddings, which I was not expecting. There's a lot of wedding venues up in the Lake Conroe area. And so we get a lot of one-night, families coming in, or the bridesmaids are going to stay there, or whatever it is, the night before the wedding, and they just stay and then go to the wedding the next day, and that's it. So up at the lake, we get like 1 night or like 2 and 3 night bookings usually. Sometimes in the summer or over the holidays, people will stay 4, 5, 6 nights. It just kind of depends, but we get shorter bookings more frequently at the lake, and then longer bookings usually in the Woodlands.
When you guys started out, I'm curious. I mean, obviously, like Andy was saying before, you read a lot of books, listened to podcasts, hopefully something like what we're doing right now. And that, did you guys, when you were starting out, did you have someone personally as like a mentor to lean on and that?
No. When I first started, like acquiring properties, there was another investor that I was working with, and I was answering phones for him and following up with people for him and going on appointments with him. So I learned a lot about what investors look for, how you have those conversations when you're buying these properties. What at the house, what can you fix versus what needs to, be completely replaced and redone, and things like that. And I'm a question asker always. And so I tried to pull in as much information as I could working with him. And so that helped me learn how to kind of turn these properties, was just watching other people do it and asking question after question after question. But in regards to all of this kind of stuff, like Andy said, we did a lot of reading, a lot of podcasts. When we first started, there were a number of investor meetups in the Woodlands area. And so we would just blanket our time with those and go to as many as we can. I am an avid note taker. And so I would just, write down anything I could and then go home and look it up, Google it, whatever. But it was a figure it out as you go kind of thing too. I mean, there was a lot of trial by fire. There were a lot of lessons. I feel like we're always learning lessons, right? There's always something that you're like, man, I should have done this, or whatever. And I think that's just life. I don't think you ever get to a place where you figure it all out, even though I really would like to, but it's just not a thing. So, I think it was a combination of having people around me that I could ask questions to. Hey, what do you think of this? That kind of thing. But then also just learning and doing stuff and making mistakes and figuring out. But then reading, there's so much free information out there. It's really incredible. And there's even more now than there was 8 years ago. And so just really like immersing yourself with things that you can learn and that are free, that you don't have to pay for, and try and just glean whatever information you can from podcasts like this, and then go listen to the next one and go read the next book and whatever. And you'll take things that serve you as you go.
So we've actually got a question. I hope you don't mind answering this. We've got a listener that is posting a question, would like to know a little bit. I think this one's pretty easy. Are insurance premiums higher for short-term rentals or standard costs for investment properties?
Yeah, so insurance premiums are the bane of my existence right now.
I think that's everybody that ever has to pay.
It has been a huge source of stress, unfortunately. So generally speaking, yes. It depends on the temperament, if you will, of the insurance company. So, sometimes like you do have to have them separate because there are different liabilities that come with that. But there are some insurance companies, like if you have multiple properties, some short-term, some long-term, they might schedule them all together. So it does depend on the insurance company, but it's not like it's double. At least that hasn't been my experience. It's not really double what it would be if it wasn't a short-term rental, but probably $500, $600, $700, $800 more a year, at least in the premium, than it would be from a regular situation. So it's definitely expensive, unfortunately, but insurance in general is right now, it's very difficult.
That's especially in Texas, definitely. So this is definitely something to shop around for.
Absolutely.
Definitely. And that, okay. If I know we're running out of time, we're over. We do try to keep this to 30 minutes, and it's not possible with all the great information that our guests come on the show with. Before we do go though and start to wrap things up, I want to ask one last question of both Elizabeth and Andy. Now that you've been doing this for like 8 years, you've built, your portfolio up to 14, 15 properties. If there's just one bit of advice that you wish somebody would have given you, or you could go back and redo, or something that you have for our listeners, what would that one bit of advice be for them?
I don't know if this is something I'd go back and redo, because I feel like somewhere, maybe I learned this from my dad, but I just have always done it this way. Like, know your numbers. Don't do a deal just to do a deal. Like, don't let your ego or other people saying, how many deals have you done? How many houses do you have? Or whatever, like, get in your head. Do what's good for you, because what you buy is not going to be the same as what I buy. And what makes sense for you is not going to make sense necessarily for me. There's a lot of nuance that goes into this, and that's hard to explain, but it is true. And so my biggest thing is know your numbers. So know where you're going to get your financing from. Are you going to borrow hard money and then refinance, or are you going to use an investor loan when you come into it, or are you using private money? Like, what is it that you're doing to take this house down to begin with? Because investment properties move quickly. So you got to be able to move quickly too. So I think having your money in place and knowing where it's going to come from is really important from the get-go. And then sticking to those numbers, like figuring out what your insurance is, figuring out what your property taxes are going to be. Are you managing this, or are you paying somebody else to manage this? Like, what are all the expenses that are going to come from holding this property, and making sure on the front end, like I had mentioned earlier, that you're good with worst case scenario and best case scenario. Do not make all of your decisions off of like pie in the sky, like I'm going to get all this rent for this house. Like, what happens if you have a month in short term where it's a low booking, or you've got vacancy in a long-term rental? Like, what does that look like, and are you still okay? So make decisions that make sure that you and your family and whoever it is that you're investing with are going to be safe and okay from a financial perspective, and just really know what those numbers are, and make a spreadsheet for yourself so that you can always refer to that and say, if this spreadsheet does not spit out a number that I'm comfortable with, that I've decided makes sense for me, I'm not doing the deal. And that needs to be okay.
Perfect. Wow. Fantastic.
The thing Yeah, sorry, Joe. The thing that I would say is very similar to what Elizabeth said, but cash might be king, but profit is power. And if you're going to get into real estate investing, you have to run it like a business, and businesses must be profitable to sustain. And so always make sure, that top line number is great for the scoreboard and great for, bragging and things like that. But at the end of the day, that bottom line, is your business profitable? Is your rental portfolio profitable? That's going to be the most important thing. So profit is power.
Wow. Fantastic. What great information. Thank you both so very, very much. Elizabeth, Andy, for coming on our show. We so appreciate all your insights you're able to give to our listeners out there. Truly do. And thank you, everyone who tuned in today. I need more coffee. Tuned in today and questions that we had, comments, really do appreciate it. If anybody wants to get a hold of Elizabeth or Andy to maybe ask additional questions or advice or anything, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you guys?
There's so many ways. You can find our company all over Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. It's Everson Cooper. So it's EVERSAN Cooper. You can find us all over social media. Anybody's welcome to message us anytime. You can also go to our website, eversancooper.com, and fill out a form or send us an email and ask us any questions. We're happy to help anybody that wants to get into this crazy world of investing. So please feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Next week, we're going to continue on with our part 4 of our 5-part series on investment properties 101 with special guest Diane Hibbs with eXp Realty, discussing from more of a realtor viewpoint and how she helps clients who are looking to get into investment properties, what to look for and how to search and how to help them, guide them through the process, if you will, in finding those properties. Want to thank everyone again for listening in, tuning in. If you only caught part of the show or you want to catch one of the previous shows that we've been talking about investment properties, go to our YouTube channel, the Mojo Show Real Estate Podcast on YouTube. And while you're there, be sure and hit the subscribe button to 1,000 subscribers. And before we close things out, Joe, any last words or nuggets of wisdom for our audience?
Just want to say thank you again to both Elizabeth and Andy for coming on. We're going to have you on for a third time. We have not had a third time participant yet. So, we still had a whole nother topic we didn't get to on this show. So we're going to have to make sure we have you guys on again. Absolutely. But thank you very much for coming on. And I know there's probably going to be people taking you up on helping out, getting started in this business, because I know my family's starting in it. So I'm going to be asking you questions.
Bring it on. Happy to help.
Yep.
Awesome.
Well, I'm Joe Mortgage, and that handsome guy there with the beard is Cup of Joe Mortgage, and we'll see you next week.
Mr.